understanding energy management when it comes to sexual polarity is vital. It's very vital. It's very important, right? Because there's something called the cup, right? And the cup is basically your social battery. It's your energy. But it's not only your social battery, but social battery is just a quick way to put it, right? You have to have enough energy based off of your instinctual variance for the time that you have to spend in self-preservation, which is alone, which is, when it comes to stoicism, that's self-soothing, right? It's self-preservation. You have to have enough energy for the sexual instinctual variant, which is between your intimate partnership, deep conversations, business endeavors that include small numbers of people, or your intimate relationships, right? Being able to meet the sexual needs of your partner, as well as having the energy to engage in those conversations. And then there's also social energy, right? And that's the social battery. That's when it comes to engagements that have to deal with the outside world, outside of your intimate relationship, or even within your intimate relationship when it comes to whether that's spending time with family. It depends on how you set up your life, right? You can set up in your life in a way where you don't need all of these things. But in the instance that these things are part of it and they're part of your dynamics, then you do need to have the energy for these different things. And what energy management does, it's understanding what your instinctual variant is, primarily what your secondary is, what's your tertiary, and just understanding that within these instinctual variants, you have to know how to recharge your battery so that you can meet the expectations that are placed for you in life. Now, within the sexual polarity quadrant, something to understand is this: when it comes to the cup, is that if you're taking a masculine dominant role, right? A masculine dominant role, you have to have a good enough ability to self-soothe or to outsource so that you have enough within your cup to not fold on your standards, but you have to have enough in your cup so that you are able to reward good behavior, right? You can't expect anyone to put trust in you as a leader if you lack the capacity to reward good behavior. So that means your perceptive skills have to also be on point, and your communication skills have to be on point. If your perception and your communication skills are on point and your competence is on point, then what that does is it gives you the capacity to where, as the individual does the things that are necessary, you are able to reward good behavior in a way that reciprocates the energy being poured into their cup. Because just because they're attracted to you or respect you or desire you doesn't mean they have an unlimited amount of energy. Energy is not an unlimited resource that humans possess, right? It's not unlimited, right? So you have to have the capacity to hold your standard, but you also have to have the capacity to place the energy into the activities that make the things that you require of another person something that is going to be enjoyable to them to a certain extent, right? Either enjoyable or beneficial. So that means that if you're a masculine dominant as a man, and let's say you start with a sexual relationship while you're vetting for a social relationship, while you're vetting to see if this is a person who you want to be emotionally engaged in, while you're vetting to see if this is a person you want to be socially engaged in, while you're vetting to see if this is someone you want to be financially connected to, that means that you have to be sexually skilled. That means that although this is energy that's pouring out of an individual through desire, because a high level of desire, it pours out energy to experience desire, right? It's like your arms are reaching out. So you have to have the self-control to understand certain things. You have to be competent in what you do, right? Now, when it comes to these different things, if you're not taking the masculine dominant role, let's say you're taking a feminine submissive role as a man, you have to have a capacity to set standards, well, not to set standards, but to meet the standard, right? You have to have a full enough cup to be receptive to the way in which you are being submissive. And you have to have enough energy to pour out desire, right? Non-sexually, without that being something that drains you completely. And then you become disillusioned and you become frustrated before you accomplish certain goals. But the goal is primarily, it needs to be based on that intrinsic desire, that intrinsic reward on that primary level. And with women, it's a similar thing, right? See, something to understand people who are insecure. When it comes to insecure people, oftentimes when I speak about insecurity, it's oftentimes about having a low cup. And what I mean by a low cup is that you have neither the self-soothing ability to maintain your standards without prematurely integrating in situations, but you also lack the ability to reward good behavior. One of the most important things, in my opinion, when it comes to relationships is being able to create a positive feedback loop and a positive trajectory between the behavior that you want to see and validating an individual in ways that make them feel good as well. So oftentimes people will trade a certain level of pleasure and enjoyment in exchange for power and control. Right? If you want to take a masculine dominant position, that means that when a person gives up control, that they experience more pleasure and more enjoyment than if they were in control themselves. If not, then they find themselves in a scenario where their masculine energy is going to resurface, and then it's going to become more so transactional. As in, when I do things in a way that my social programming or my previous thought process indicated I should do things, when I do things in that way, I feel less drained. So therefore, I'm going to stay in my masculine energy. Now, that's for a person who's taking a submissive role. That's like a masculine submissive woman, right? Anytime you drain out so much energy from an individual without having a capacity of rewarding good behavior, then even if they have a feminine submissive desire towards you or a feminine submissive inclination towards you, they won't be able to maintain and or to sustain that. And once that cup gets low, then typically one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to have this feminine desire towards you, which says that I still want you, but now I want you, but I want things my way. And therefore, I know that I can't directly communicate to you how I want things my way. So therefore, I am willing to manipulate you or force you or abuse you or do something along those lines in order to get my way. That's the feminine dominant, right? It's where the principles and the process are no longer stated in a masculine way. It's where the principles and the process are no longer the priority. It's just about the desire for what I want. Right? That's the feminine dominant. That's what happens when the cup gets low. So a feminine submissive woman, she can be feminine submissive with you, then her cup gets low, and then she can turn into the feminine dominant. Right? And they could also be just through inconsistency. That's another thing that can occur. Right? Love bombing, all these different things, right? But then you also have the masculine submissive, and that's where it says, my cup is getting too low to continue to pour out to you in a way that would meet up to your standards. Therefore, if you want anything above what standard, anything above the level of energy I naturally have to pour out, from this point, it's going to be a negotiation and a compromise based off of what you want versus what I want. And when you set that precedent, it creates this thing that starts to kill polarity through symmetry, starts to kill polarity through transaction. It starts to stir up psychological reactance. It starts to stir up things that kill passion, right? Passionate romantic love within dynamics kills a natural desire to move forward in a way that has a positive trajectory, because the masculine submissiveness is based off of stagnancy. So you have to understand energy management. And you need to be able to recognize when it's a situation where a person wants too much from you versus an individual who's actually trying to give something to you and you just have a low cup. Right? If you do not understand this, then you will feel worn out and drained in scenarios that's really more so about your lack of ability to manage your energy. Right? A lack of an ability to manage your energy. And it will start to subvert the dynamic. You have to be able to manage your energy so that you can properly reward good behavior, or so that you can meet the standard for that behavior to be rewarded. Because what can transpire is that if you're an insecure person, you will desire and require behavior to be rewarded that isn't good behavior. And by wanting your bad behavior or your lack thereof of good behavior to be rewarded, you start to limit the ability for that situation to grow, and you start to grow accustomed to receiving validation in moments and reassurance in moments where you do not deserve it, based off of the trajectory set of that dynamic. And then if you're no longer receiving that, then you'll start to feel hurt by the fact that you aren't receiving it. You'll start to feel bad, right? Or the other person, if they're in that situation, they will start to feel bad, and then you'll feel as if you are correct for pulling away. You'll feel as if you're correct for neglecting your relationship. And with the modern climate, you will start to rationalize and justify why in your mind that person is mistreating you when they aren't mistreating you. Right? So it's very important to understand these things. I think the better we understand these things, the better relationships can be. I do think that a foundation of intrinsic desire and intrinsic reward in a particular area is great, but just because somebody experiences pleasure or intrinsic desire or intrinsic reward doesn't always mean that it's going to be a situation where that can sustain itself by itself. Right? So you have to understand the different places of gaining energy. So it's not only about the energy management of the energy you already have, but how to get energy. If you're a self-preservation based person, one thing that I very much emphasize is having the capacity of knowing when you don't have the energy to meet up to certain standards at that moment, and you know how to go into situations to regain that energy. For some people, that's socially. That means you need to go out in public, go out to the mall, the supermarket, maybe a club, depending on the boundaries of your relationship dynamic, and interact with people, or at least be around people and absorb the energy of the people around you. Social interaction. That's if you're primarily a social instinctual variant. And that comes from the Enneagram when we're talking about instinctual variants, right? If you're a self-preservationist, then you primarily derive energy from taking time to recharge your battery by being alone. Most introverts are like that, but not all introverts. I'm an introvert, INTJ, which is one of the most introverted types within the Myers-Briggs typology. I'm also an Enneagram 5, which is the most introverted type within the within Enneagram, right? But at the same time, I'm primarily a sexual instinctual variant. So that means that deep conversations, long conversations, diving into deep topics that I'm interested in, those are things that recharge me. Those are things that fill my cup, that recharge my battery. Engaging in sexual scenarios, intense sexual scenarios. I'm a dom, I'm in the BDSM. Those are things that recharge my battery sometimes even more than just self-preservation and being alone, right? So that's the social, the sexual, and the self-preservation. You have to know how to recharge your battery. So like, let's say you're a woman, your cup is low for one reason or another, and that's something that's negatively affecting your relationship dynamic. It's negatively affecting your ability to meet up to, let's say it's the sexual standards of your partner. Let's say you are just tired tonight and you reject the opportunity to engage in sex with your partner, right? Now, if that man is primarily a masculine dominant, you have to understand that that can leave a bad taste in their mouth, right? If you reject the opportunity to connect with your partner, and that's their primary way of managing their own energy, right? Then in order to avoid that being a situation where their cup gets low as well, right? Or for them to just leave, right? Not saying that's always how it's going to work, but they may not want to take things further than they are. Or it creates a negative feedback loop, right? Now, if you are the type of person who will recharge your battery in the way that's necessary for you, and then make an active effort to rectify and to correct the situation that could have put a bad taste in their mouth, instead of just saying that everything's cool after you reject that advance, then let's say you're a self-preservationist. Then you may take a little bit of time to be alone, You actively recharge your battery, doing the things you know that recharge your battery, and then you make an active effort to take the risk yourself of being sexually rejected, right? You make an active effort to reciprocate. You take an active effort to make that happen. But to reject the advance and then to expect the person to continue to pour into your cup, right? Like, especially if they say, okay, cool, I understand it's cool tonight. You know, you're tired, I get it. Like, let's say one of the things that may fill your cup, maybe as a woman, may be, you know, cuddling and talking in the bed at night. Want to make sure that you're being honest about how you feel. Because let's say you say you're sleepy or you say you're tired, right? But then after you say you're tired, you want to sit there in bed and cuddle up and lay up all night. Now you're draining out of his battery because the validation, you're rejecting the opportunity to pour validation into his cup, yet you're trying to siphon more and more energy out of him. Now, if both of your cups get low, then you're going to go to a negative place. So you want to make sure that you're creating strong, positive feedback loops. So in the instance that that opportunity is rejected, then you do what you have to do to recharge your battery, and then you initiate, right? If when that opportunity is rejected, he's still on good faith, from the benefit of the doubt, pours more energy into you, then you need to reward that with even more energy than what would have been poured into you, or that you would have put into the sexual encounter if you did it anyways. Right? Understand what I'm saying? Because once you create a feedback loop of rejecting that opportunity, siphoning more energy, and then being cold-faced or stone-faced or expecting them to meet you halfway, you then put yourself in a scenario where they're going to be less and less inclined towards continuing to pour energy into you when you're not reciprocating their advances, when you're not receptive to their advances. So then it may turn into situations where once you reject the sexual advance, now your man doesn't want to, you know, sleep in the bed with you at night. He doesn't want to cuddle up with you. He doesn't want to talk. Because now he has to go into self-preservation about his own energy to protect himself from you siphoning his energy. You have to understand these things, right? Now, I do believe one thing I often say is that if you can make love, you can make up. It's not going to be true 100% of the time, but putting yourself in a scenario that strengthens the Dom-Sub dynamics in that particular moment, that leads to that experience of oxytocin and those experiences of dopamine that make you feel closer together, and then communicating what issues are, I do think that's better than treating situations on a foundation of you communicate and then you have sex later. Right? Now, if you're a masculine dominant woman, that may be one of the best ways to do things if that man is feminine and submissive with you emotionally. Cool. But if you are a submissive woman, then that subverts the dynamic, and then it will feel as if it is becoming transactional of you having sex for emotional validation, which for a dominant man will be a turnoff. Energy management is important. Energy management is very important. So this is Coach Brody. I'm out.